You're live.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second meeting of the Public Safety Subcommittee. We will be working on House Bill 670 today, and I'm just scanning to make sure all of our committee members are here. I see Delegate Anderson. We have a couple more that need to join us, but they will just have to come in. Hello, Delegate Griffith, Lopez, Delegate Shetty. So we're waiting on Delegate Moon and Delegate Sham, but they will join us when they can. Okay, so I want to start off today's meeting by saying that this is a process, and this is a process run by the House Judiciary Committee. And because we are in this time of COVID and the pandemic and dealing in this virtual world, we have to have a controlled process since we all can't sit down and be in a room together. And our staff works incredibly hard. I want to thank Dylan Goldberg from the chair's office and Liz from my office, Liz Twig. We will be sending out from my office the Zoom link for this. We have told delegates who've wanted to participate, we cannot have 500 people in the subcommittee while we're trying to get through all this important work that we're doing. And it makes it incredibly, incredibly, incredibly difficult when the link gets sent around to other people that were not invited by us. We very thoughtfully went through and made a list of all the stakeholders, all of the interested parties, and invited everyone. And it came to my attention that the Zoom link was being sent around. We cannot do that. I quite frankly am saying, I don't know what other subcommittees might do. I will shut it down and it will just be the subcommittee members because we are not going to put our staff through that to try to decipher who's who and what's what while we have to just get to the business of police reform in our state. So with that being said, we will start the meeting. First, we are going to today take a look. The speaker has some amendments that she is proposing to the legislation. We're going to start with that today. In general, this is how we're going to move through the bill. I know it's a lot of information, but I have broken it down in sections, if you will. Today, we're going to work on the speaker's amendments. The next, we're going to go through what I believe to be non-controversial parts of the bill. And then after that, we will move through the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights and Accountability, and then we will move through use of force. So that is how we're going to move through these next meetings today and to next week. Had a conversation with Alex, and we do think it is a good idea to walk through the entire bill with the subcommittee members. So we will try to perhaps maybe do that one day if we can find time when we're all on the floor, if we can figure out how to do it socially distanced. So we'll walk through that. But that's how we're going to move through the bill. So with that being said, Ms. Hughes, would you like to walk us through the speaker's proposed amendments? And I will also say this is not a public hearing. We have had a public hearing on this bill. I appreciate all of the interested parties who are participating today. And if we have a question, a member has a question, then we will direct that to the appropriate person. Ms. Hughes.
Madam Chair, thank you. Good morning, or good morning, subcommittee members and everyone on the call. I'm sure that, having sat through the hearing and the speaker was with you guys for the 4.5 hours that it took to get through her bill. And I'm sure that all of you are being contacted by a number of different advocacy organizations and interested parties. And so the speaker wanted to put on the table some conceptual amendments for you guys to consider that she felt coming out of the hearing were sort of important points that the work group had not considered in their work that came out during the hearing. We're happy to get these drafted if it's something that the subcommittee is interested in, but she really just wanted to kind of put them on the table for consideration for you guys. First, on the charging committees, I think these are probably just clarifying, but a number of you have asked us. The intent, I believe, of the bill was that the state's attorneys and the public defender appointments were civilian appointments, not the state's attorneys and not an actual state's attorney, assistant state's attorney, or a public defender. So I think that's probably just clarifying. For both the charging committees and the trial boards that are contained in the bill, that everyone serving on those, both the charging committee and the trial boards, would need to go through a training process run by MPTSC. Let's see. This is, I think, a little bit of a nexus with some of the work that the Commission to Restore Trust in Policing worked on. But one of the issues that she feels pretty strongly about is that the charging committees should be able to look at supervisory deficiencies as a part of their work. So if, for instance, if you think about the gun trace task force, it wasn't just sort of the rank and file officers, but they were also sort of commanding officer problems and supervision problems that she thinks that the charging committee should be able to look into should a situation warrant it. I think also we had not considered, but it was raised, I think in a separate meeting that the speaker had, that you guys should consider what a charging committee for statewide law enforcement agencies look like. Right now, the charging committees are sort of based on counties or county jurisdictional lines. And so for like state police or DNR police, you guys should kind of think about what that looks like, because the makeup of the charging committee right now includes, for instance, an appointment from the county state's attorney. And I'm not sure that it makes sense to have state police if something happens in Allegheny County versus something happening in Prince George's County, that it would just be under the kind of local jurisdiction. So probably something for you guys to consider. On the trial boards, I think I'll say three big things sort of jumped out at her during the hearing. One, that smaller law enforcement agencies should be able to kind of partner with a larger agency for a trial board process, particularly when you have trained civilians. There may not be one for, I hate to pick on Chief Morris, but there may not be one for Riverdale, for instance, versus Prince George's County Sheriffs or something. So I'll just put that there for consideration. I think you guys also probably need to think about when an officer is entitled to a trial board. Is it in all circumstances? Is it in some circumstances? Is it during, like, for disputed facts? So just an issue for you guys to consider. And then finally, she's heard from a number of members, and I've heard from advocacy groups. So she's going to propose to you guys to change the makeup of the trial board. The work group had recommended 1/3 civilians. I think she would like to offer for you guys to consider a law enforcement officer, potentially of equal rank, one civilian that would be appointed by the Police Accountability Board that Delegate Davis advocated for in the work group. And then either an ALJ or a retired judge. So it would be a 3-member trial board, effectively 2 civilians, for you guys to consider. There are a number of other sort of smaller issues. I think globally, things that were left that were not considered specifically by the work group for you guys to consider would be things like a uniform complaint process, so that, statewide, everyone can sort of participate in this, can file a police complaint in the same way. Whether or not there's whistleblower protections for an officer that may potentially face retaliation. For saying that there was evidence planting or some other problem within the department. And then finally, I think originally the speaker's intent around warrants was to both limit no-knock warrants and also limit the time of any warrant that's being served, which I know at this point is incredibly controversial among some of our state's attorneys' friends and other folks. One thing that she would like to offer for you guys to consider is that a warrant could be served outside of, I think it's 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the bill if there was both officer approval or a supervisor within the department and someone from the state's attorney's approving. So there's a higher threshold in order to serve any warrant. One thing that has been raised that I think you guys should consider is whether or not that's just for property, right? I think part of what the work group had talked about and considered is trying to avoid somebody busting through the front door of the wrong house, for instance. But one thing that you should think about is in a DUI case, for instance, right? You may need to get a warrant to take blood. So just think about kind of the nuances around the warrant situation, but I think she's open to having that conversation. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm sure that there will be a lot more amendments and thoughts and concepts offered, but she just wanted to throw those out for the subcommittee to consider.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the subcommittee have a question related to what Ms. Hughes just presented? If you do, you can raise your hand, Delegate Anderson. You can use the raise your hand function, or you can wave it and hopefully I'll see you.
And we'll just, Madam Chair, we'll circulate these in concept and writing to the subcommittee as well.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Alex. With regard to the training process for the civilians that will be on the Police Training and Standards Commission, does that include state's attorneys and public defenders? Would they have to go through the training process as well?
Yeah, so I think the speaker's concept is that everybody would.
Okay, because it would seem to me that the public defenders of Maryland and the state's attorneys would send somebody who has criminal experience. Okay, that's just a question. Okay, my other question is with regard to serving warrants after hours. You wanted another level of that the officer would have to go through, and that is to get approval from that state's attorney from that county, right?
Yes.
Okay, and could they do that virtually, or do they have to do that in person?
Sure. I mean, that's totally up to you guys. I mean, I think the chiefs in particular made a persuasive argument that there may be times that you want to, I mean, for lack of a better term, not let people know that you're coming to serve a warrant. But I think there's concern that, it's that every person doesn't always use the most judicious standard in determining when you get a warrant. So we would leave that to the subcommittee to decide what the most effective use or way to do that is.
Okay, and I think you mentioned getting it approved by the state's attorney before they go to the judge. Did you say somebody? Did you say another entity or somebody else?
A commanding officer. It can be a commanding.
Okay.
I said commanding officer and a state's attorney. It could be or. I mean, it's really up to the subcommittee.
All right, and a commanding officer can be down to what rank? Down to sergeant, down to captain, what?
I think it depends on who's serving, on who's trying to get the warrant, right? If it's a detective, would be their supervisor.
Oh, their supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Delegate Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm intrigued by one of the pieces you pulled out here, which is a uniform complaint process. That's one of the things that seems like glaringly missing, I guess, from the bill, is we didn't really discuss it. And even the way it's phrased, it says we're going to have an independent investigation unit. But I started trying to walk it back to where are these complaints coming from, and where do they go from the initial problem? And so I'm guessing there's sort of two tracks. There's complaints that are coming either from internal affairs or the chief or somewhere within the department, and there's a disciplinary process initiated, or they're coming from the public. And I guess I'm curious if we're seeing the process as the same for both types of complaints, and two, at least for the public facing one, it does seem to me very useful to have a uniform complaint process here. Otherwise, I think there's even a question about whether you complain to the police department itself or to this new unit we've created. But I guess my global question is this: what's the best way for us to proceed on this? Are we trying to agree to stuff conceptually in these work sessions, or is there something else, I guess, in mind?
And I'll leave that to your chair.
I think we are going to try to agree to some things conceptually, and after we do that, we can have something for everyone to look at. I know you have amendments that are going to be offered. Delegate Deborah Davis sent amendments that will be offered. So that's why I broke the bill down into sections. We'll talk about it conceptually. If you have an amendment ready, then you can bring that amendment when we're discussing that particular section, and we'll go over it. But I think, yes, we'll discuss it conceptually. If you have something already in your mind that you want to offer an amendment, then feel free to offer it. Is that it, David? Delegate Moon?
Yeah. I'm just
Okay.
curious.
Okay. Delegate Shetty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hughes, for joining us today and for sharing these conceptual amendments. Really helpful. So I just had one question and then one clarifying thing, because you were a little fast for me on one section. So the clarifying question I have is, going back to Delegate Anderson's questions about the warrants. So I know you mentioned needing supervisor and state's attorney approval. Are you all thinking for both the no-knock warrants and general warrants, or just
Yes.
one or the other? Okay.
I would say no-knock warrants, and then the warrants outside of the 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. time that's currently in the bill.
Okay, so it would be like an added thing. Okay, got it. Thank you. And then the part that I just couldn't quite get all my notes down quick enough. You had talked about some amendments to the trial board section as it relates to smaller law enforcement agencies. Can you just go over that part one more time, please?
So there may be smaller departments, right, that are 10 officers or less. And so I think the issue is, let's say they sit in Prince George's County, that you allow them to partner with a larger agency for the trial board process, right? If there's a charging committee, that's a Prince George's County charging committee, right? The way that the bill is currently structured, based on some of what the work group talked about, is that there is then a trial board, right, within a department. And so the question is, what happens if the department is not enough people to sort of, to rotate, that doesn't have conflicts, to rotate through for the trial board process? Do you allow them to partner with a larger agency?
Got it. Or like a really hopefully horrible scenario that is unlikely, but like many officers being involved in one case or something, in those types of instances, maybe.
Right.
Too. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Delegate Erican?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Ms. Hughes, for being here. I'm just going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions just to get an idea about where the speaker wanted to go with some of this stuff. So my first question is, for the training, did she have any opinion on whether we should include like a live simulation training? Our committee did that, and I thought it was really informative.
I mean, it's completely up to you guys.
Okay, that's good.
I think MPSC right now has a training in place for civilians that they've put forward for the trial boards. I'm not sure what that includes, but that may be something you guys want to consider.
Okay, and then I just want to make sure I understood that she wants to change the makeup of the trial board now to be the 3 members, the law enforcement of equal rank, a civilian. And what was the details about the civilian?
A civilian appointed by the Police Accountability Board. So the Police Accountability Board was a recommendation of Delegate Davis that every county would have a Police Accountability Board that could consider sort of policy changes, that could do, like, if you're familiar with like the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board, I think Howard County has one. There's a number of counties that have it. Delegate Davis has suggested that every county have one, and the speaker is suggesting that be the group that appoint to the trial board.
Okay, and then was that for just?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to, is that just for the civilian, or is that also for the ALJ? Who would appoint the ALJ?
For the civilian.
Okay.
I would leave that up to you guys.
Okay, so no real guidance on that one, that's fine. And then for the uniform complaint process, did she have a framework? Is there another state that she's looking to that has something like that we could sort of go off of?
I think we have one now.
Oh, for like a certain jurisdiction that we could just apply statewide, or?
You mean
is
the
this-
General
Yeah, I mean, this-
Assembly? You meant the General Assembly, Ms. Hughes has one? Is that what you
No,
meant?
I mean, there are like uniform complaint processes that exist in the state of Maryland that we could look at and mirror.
Okay, that's good. And then I liked the whistleblower protection idea. I mean, I think that's really important. Did she have any language that she thought would be best
Again, if the
used?
committee's open to it, we're happy to provide like specific amendment language. But I think at this point, we were just trying to see where you guys were conceptually before putting staff through drafting a million amendments.
Okay, awesome. And then I think Delegate Shetty touched on my last question. So, okay, thank you very much.
And just Madam Chair, if I can, just to be clear, I mean, I don't think anyone has any delusions that you guys are going to make a number of changes to the bill, which is fine. I think these were just things that she sort of personally felt were important for you guys to consider that built on the work of the work group.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions for, no, Delegate
Delegate
McComas' hand just popped up. I think you do that trying to be sneaky, McComas. You got to unmute yourself.
Well, I'm digitally challenged. Anyway,
We've been Zooming for like a year, but
well,
Not a year yet. It's not a year yet.
yeah, I know, but it could be a disability. Maybe I could apply for SSI or something. Okay, anyway, I digress. My question on the Baltimore City Civilian Accountability Board was that was not done through state law, was it?
It was.
It was done through state law?
Yeah,
Okay.
you guys, I
But
bet
it's-
that you were on the committee when you guys did it.
Well, I'm getting senile too. Okay, all right. Other question.
There have been a number of bills over the years. Like you guys established the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board, and then I mean there may have been some local changes.
But
it
the
was
point
established.
is that it was not a statewide bill. So the way it worked was every jurisdiction, if they wanted a civilian accountability board, they would come to the legislature, let's say Harford County or
So
Baltimore.
Delegate Davis's Delegate Davis's idea, and I'll let her speak for herself, but as I recall in the work group, her idea was that that state law would authorize all 20 or require all 24 jurisdictions to have a police accountability board. I mean, Delegate Davis, I don't want to speak for you, but
it's in the bill. We
What?
voted it out of we voted her recommendation out of the work group, so it's in the bill as
Yeah,
drafted
yeah.
right now.
But I think Delegate Davis, that the way that the bill's drafted captures sort of what your intent was, but I don't want to speak for you.
Yes, it is in the bill and the intent is there. And I agree that it's a good place to get that extra person from.
So
McComas?
Delegate McComas, the bill requires every county, all 24 jurisdictions, to have in place the equivalent of the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board. I know Baltimore better, so that's why I refer to it that way, but essentially a police accountability board that could look at individual police processes, that would sort of be a recourse for civilians to go to in the event that they were concerned about police operations, et cetera.
So basically, is there a specific number of people that have to be on the police accountability board?
So I think it's whatever you guys say it is.
Well, it's
Not in the
thing
bill.
about, okay, because obviously a bigger jurisdiction should probably have more voices because it's a bigger jurisdiction versus a small county. Let's say the ones on the Eastern Shore. I mean, we have folks that represent maybe 4 counties, just one delegate that represent 4 counties. So that's all I'm kind of concerned about. Plus the idea of still maintaining some kind of, Maryland's got the history of being America in miniature, and all the jurisdictions are very, very different cultures, different personality. And I realize we want to create uniformity so that people have trust and feel secure dealing with the police. But also I think we have to recognize that all politics is local. And I think that better laws are made when the community has the input and there is care and concern for what the community wants and not what maybe Annapolis wants. So I just throw that out. And I know, I think Vanessa's going to say, yeah, but the group agreed with it. But I just think we do have to have respect for localities and the culture and the way things go with localities. That's all.
Yeah, so again, I don't want to speak to Delegate Davis, but I think the intent here was that it would in fact be the local communities kind of taking more ownership over, you know, how policing is effectuated in their counties, you know, based on the fact that it's a public asset the taxpayers pay for. So, you know, I mean, I think it's up to you guys if you want to, you know, say that the local governing body decides who's on, that, you know, there have to be a certain number of civilians. I mean, I think that's completely up to you guys, or you can stay silent. Like, speaker doesn't really have a view on that one way or another.
Is that it, Delegate McComas? Okay, Delegate Griffith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hughes, for coming out. Quick
Like you're
question.
talking to my mom every time you say that.
Sorry, I can't help
That's
myself.
okay.
It's the military in me. It's ma'am, it's sir, it's all that. Just a quick question. One of the bills that we had was the bill to transition control of the Baltimore City Police Department. The bill I support. I think they should have local control, and I support that in everything we're doing. Has what we're working on and what you're proposing, how would that impact that transition of local control back to Baltimore, or to, I'm not even back, I guess, for the first time ever, to Baltimore City of their police department?
So as all of you will recall, the House has passed this bill before. It is included in the omnibus work group bill because it was a recommendation of the work group. But my understanding, and I don't want to speak for the administration, my understanding is that Mayor Scott has a slightly different way to do it. And so I think as long as it gets done, the speaker's agnostic on whether or not it's contained in this bill or in a separate bill.
Thank you.
Yeah, Delegate Griffith, we can amend it out of this bill, I think was the thought. Any other questions for Ms. Hughes? Okay, if not, thank you. So now what I want to do is go through what I hope are the non-controversial parts of the bill. So hopefully you all have it in front of you. If not, hopefully you can pull it up pretty quickly. And if you have any questions, please raise your hands. If you have any questions for any of the advocates or other interested parties here, you can direct your question to them as well. Okay, and I should let you know, you can see everybody's name that is here, but there's representatives from the Maryland Police Training Standards Commission, the Police and Sheriffs, the FOP, State Police, advocates. I know Davon Love is here, the ACLU is here, Samson Yahweh and Duray McKennison are here, and Kaylin Young from the ACLU, so, and Neil Franklin from LEAP. So if you have any questions, and I see David Roca from ACLU too, if you want to direct your question to them, that's perfectly fine. So I want to start with tuition, which is on page 6, and I see Delegate Anderson is taking a phone call, but if he wanted to speak to this, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. This was Delegate Anderson's recommendation, which I thought was a great one in the work group that we voted out. And it is on page 6, line 18. And so it requires that a public institution, a Maryland institution, exempts individual from paying tuition, essentially, if they are going to commit to serving in a Maryland Police Department for a certain time period. And we are talking to appropriations because this language might have to be tightened up according to our higher education folks here in the state. Delegate Anderson, did you want to speak to this provision?
Six, seven, 8 people.
I'm sorry, did you ask me a question, Vanessa?
I just didn't know if you wanted, this was your recommendation related to the tuition. I didn't know if you wanted to say something about it, why you thought it was important. You don't have to.
Well, no, I mean, damn, I'm sorry, I was on a phone call. I was just, the tuition waiver program would be similar to what is currently being done around the country with ROTC programs, for instance. So instead of having a young person in an African-American institution, HBCU, enter, because thousands of them enter into ROTC programs, this will give them the chance to enter into law enforcement program and have their tuition paid. And whatever the language is that the Appropriations Committee thinks is appropriate, that's fine with me.
Okay. Delegate Bartlett, I see you have your hand raised.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Billy.
I love this portion.
Or Delegate Anderson, go ahead and mute yourself. Sorry, Delegate Bartlett. Go ahead, Delegate Bartlett.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So I love this portion of the bill, but I see a loophole.
Okay.
And I see the loophole because I would qualify for this portion of the bill, yet I'm not sure I would qualify. I'm sure the police force wants me at my tender age of 25. But anyway, so my point is that it doesn't say, it says that you intend. And so I'm concerned about that intent because I actually have, I used to have a dream of becoming a member of law enforcement. So I don't know if we can, we might want to consider some type of language around that intention.
Like commits, like someone who commits to.
Yeah, commits. I like that. That's good.
Although I'm sorry to interject here without being recognized, I apologize, but doesn't the subsequent language on page 7 note that the individual would have to repay it if they don't actually work as a police officer for 5 years? So I don't know if that covers your concern or not, but I just wanted, I had the same concern and then I read a little further. So I don't know if that covers it or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know. I just think, I just kind of think we should tighten it up, but I understand what you're saying. Because if you don't go in to the force, right, you don't get the benefit of this, and ultimately you have to pay it back. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not, but it's just something I happen to notice because, if they'll take me, I might just apply. I'm the forever student.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Bartlett. And Matt Jackson and Clara Rossmark, if you feel like you need to interject, please feel free to do so. So I saw Delegate Arakan and then Delegate Lopez and then Delegate McComas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also love this provision. I was just wondering did approps give you any ideas about what kind of language tightening needed to be done? I did notice that on page 7, line 1, it doesn't actually specify a Maryland police agency. It just says a police officer. So could they just leave our state and become a police officer still?
So I don't have language yet. I do know that they have some concerns, and this just came to my attention this morning. So I know they've spoken appropriations, so we have to circle back with them, but I will note your concern. I mean, it says the Maryland Higher Education Commission has to adopt the regs. And then on the previous page, page 6, page 18, it says a public institution. It doesn't specifically say a Maryland public institution. So
Yeah, I didn't notice that too. I guess we should probably clean that up too. But my concern was if they went to a Maryland public institution, on line 1 of page 7, it says that they have to work as a police officer. It doesn't say. Does it say that? No.
No, that's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Because
we
we want to keep our guys here. We don't want to pay for their education and then have them go to Virginia or somewhere better.
Good point.
Officer.
Thank you. Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a quick clarifying question. So I wasn't on on the work group, and I don't know if this was discussed, but can someone just tell me very quickly, like, what's the current standard for education for either Maryland State Police or like the general standard for the different localities? I was under the impression it's like an AA. Is that right?
So I will let Mike Davey answer that question, but I will say the intent of the work group was, one, recruiting Maryland folks, and two, really let folks know that our police officers, this is a profession, and we want folks to get a 4-year education. And so that's really the conversation that the work group had, that, no disrespect to anyone, but we don't want folks coming out of high school and, going through some 6-month training and on the streets with a gun. We really want to professionalize our police officers here in the state of Maryland, and we want them, to be able to get an education. We should support them if they commit to staying here. That was kind of the thought of the work group, and help to retain, I think, Delegate Anderson's, not to speak for him, and he can correct me, the focus was to really recruit minorities and to help them stay here and work in our communities. But Mr. Davey, if you want to.
Yes, thank you. Just under the Maryland Police Training Commission, the minimum
I'm sorry,
state.
just say who you are for folks who don't know.
Sorry, Mike Davey. I'm the attorney for the Fraternal Order of Police, and I'm also a retired captain from the state police. Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission has a basic bottom line that you must be a high school graduate or receive the GED. There are some agencies that do require AA degrees, Howard County being one of them. But many of the academies that you go through now, especially like the Maryland State Police, you are earning college credits by just going through the academy. I think in the state police, you're very close to getting an AA degree just based on the academic coursework in the police academy. So the basic is a high school diploma or a GED, but there are some agencies that do require the AA, or that you obtain an AA degree within a certain amount of time upon graduating from the police academy to further your education. The only other comment that I had on this section of the bill is that I would hope this would include current law enforcement officers. If we want to make our police departments more educated, we should not forget those who are already here. And I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, I joined the Maryland State Police in 1982 with a high school degree. I took it upon myself, with my wife's pushing, to go to Catonsville and get my AA degree. I then went to the University of Baltimore at night and got my BA, and actually went to law school at night, all during my course and employment as a Maryland State Trooper. Not the easiest thing in the world. It took me 13 years to do it, but I think this opportunity should be provided to not only those intending to be police officers, but who are currently police officers. Thank you.
Does that satisfy your question, Delegate Lopez?
Sure. I just have one quick follow-up too. Was it discussed in the work group just to raise the standard past high school GED for the Maryland State Police?
Meaning?
Like, as a part of this conversation, like if we're offering people like an educational incentive or essentially a stipend, was there a conversation about just increasing the standard for, I guess, recruitment right now?
I don't recall that conversation. Delegate Moon can jump in. Alex, if you all recall, I don't believe.
Well, the only thing I would just add, thank you. The only thing I'll add is this was the subject of extensive conversation, as the chairman and Delegate Anderson will remember, in 2016. And I think at the end of the day, there were a number of concerns, particularly from the chiefs and sheriffs, about recruitment. If we increased, I think at that point we were talking about increasing it to an AA or a military service. So we eventually abandoned that idea, and maybe the chiefs could comment, but that's how I recall the conversation.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Next, Delegate Sham.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding page 6, line 20, going back to the 4-year degree. how does majors and minors play into this? Is the criminal law, criminology, and criminal justice, is that the major that the potential police officer had to major in? Because I know sometimes you can minor in these things, but it may not necessarily be a major. Is it that technical that we're looking at?
I believe the conversation the work group had was that had to be your concentration, so major.
Oh, your major.
Delegate Anderson is tied up right now, so he can't tell us his intent, but I believe it was that had to be your focus.
Okay.
And maybe that language needs to be tightened up too. Thank you. Anything else, Delegate Sham? Delegate Anderson, the question posed by Delegate Sham was the intent that you had to major in, so your focus was criminology, criminal law, or whatnot, or could you also minor in it?
I suspect you could minor in it. What I did was I called
Not
around.
what I said, but okay.
Say again?
I said I thought your intent was to major in it, but you go ahead.
Oh, no, my intent was to major in it.
Okay.
And calling around to the HBCUs. I called Bowie, I called Morgan, I called Coppin to find out what criminal related courses they had and could they offer a major in those courses. The three that I came up with were the ones that currently exist as far as majors are concerned. And also to answer the question, I think a Delegate Bartlett was asking in terms of could somebody 40-some years old take the course and then not go through with it. If you look on page 7 of the bill, lines 1 through 4, we say that you have to earn the 4-year degree, and then you have to work as a police officer for at least 5 years during the 8-year period if you want your tuition forgiven. So they give you we give you the tuition, but if you don't work as a police officer for those for at least 5 years during the 8-year period after graduation, I mean, then you don't get it forgiven. Does that make sense? Or did I make sense?
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna take 2 more questions and then we're moving off of tuition. I thought this would be much quicker, but everyone has made excellent points. Delegate Shetty and then Delegate McComas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Anderson, for this really wonderful suggestion. I am all for tuition forgiveness and loan forgiveness. So I was curious if, like, as part of that discussion, there was a discussion about loan forgiveness in particular. So for people who would have qualified, but then maybe, maybe they've already majored in this, but they've already graduated, or if they're already serving, do they get to participate in this program? And then separately, there, many of these programs for like teachers and doctors at the federal level are tailored in some way. So they tend to offer like a requirement that, for example, the student has to serve in like an underserved area, or be maybe part of like a population of underserved individuals, or otherwise underserved individuals. So I don't know if like there was a discussion around tailoring it in any way, but just kind of wanted to put those out there.
To answer your last question first, in looking at police departments around the state and asking them why there weren't higher numbers of minorities involved, the answer almost universally was that we can't find qualified applicants. And in most cases, some of the qualifications are because the student or the prospective applicant failed in terms of like marijuana use in the last 3 years. But there also some of the applicants failed because they couldn't pass the test. And what this bill was kind of dedicated to do was to give police departments around the state the opportunity to have a pool of these young folks who have graduated with this, tuition forgiveness or tuition aid, whatever you want to call it, and let them apply to the other departments so that there would be a greater pool in each of the divisions. I guess it would be up to the student as to whether or not she or he wanted to go to Prince George's County or to Oakland, Maryland, to serve. The first part of the question, and I'll go back to what the gentleman from the Police Training Commission said, and that is currently the only educational requirement is that you finish high school, you be a high school graduate. So this takes that student beyond that. Obviously, a student who is getting a 4-year degree is a high school graduate, and this just tries to point some of them in the direction of law enforcement.
Totally. And I think that's awesome. I just am curious if there's been a discussion specifically about like people who might currently qualify under the remainder part of this, like maybe they majored in criminal justice and they attended a Maryland institution and they either intend to serve or currently serve. Maybe they're like in year 3 of 5. Would they be eligible for loan forgiveness instead of tuition assistance? So they already attended their program, but we want to try and keep them in the force, instead of have them maybe accept a higher paying job elsewhere, for example. I just am wondering.
Yeah, I see your point.
Yeah, it could be part of the discussion to ensure that like we're continuing to recruit and retain.
Right, and for those folks that you're talking about, half of them probably still are paying their tuition back. The other half are probably found some way to pay as they went. So I guess we'd have to figure out a way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 20 years out almost, and I'm still paying. So I'm just putting out there that loan forgiveness can be a really powerful way to ensure that you're recruiting and retaining qualified individuals.
So
okay, folks, I'm gonna stop this. It's 12:17. We have to get, I'm gonna call on Delegate Davis because she hasn't asked the question yet. And then we're gonna have to get off tuition. We got to get through this easy stuff and tick it off. We have to, okay? We're gonna have to get through use of force and LEOBR by the end of next week, okay? So that we can get something through the Judiciary Committee and onto the House floor. If we're spending 2 hours on tuition, this is going to be problematic, okay? So if anybody has some very serious concerns, please send myself an email or call me and we'll work through that. If something needs to be amended, we can work through that with Claire and Matt. Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important that we know where we're going with this so we can make sure we send you all the stuff in. So that's important and I appreciate it. I've got 3 things I want us to consider. One is the idea of raising the educational standard. If it's just to an AA, I'd like to have some discussion about it. And the possibility of expanding this to public safety officers in general, adding public safety officers to it. I'd like to know what Delegate Anderson thinks about that. And lastly, you guys always know I'm the conspiracy sister here. I've got a question. So we're creating a new class of officers. Maybe they go through education and they made a commitment that if they stay for 5 years, they don't have to pay the money back, right? So there's a financial incentive to stay. But does that put them in an unusual position where if they're disciplined or if they do something wrong, there is a big incentive to hide it because there's financial incentive. So can we think in the future about what we might put in there to fix that, to plug up that hole about maybe his boss, maybe his supervisor knows that, he has an incentive, a financial incentive other than his employment, a huge financial incentive to I don't know, to do something or to not do something, or I don't know, to keep his job. Perhaps maybe just the commitment would be enough. Yeah, I just want us to address that.
I would like, Kurt, Delegate Anderson, you can address that if you want. In terms of raising the standard, I think that was in the first part of your question, Deborah Davis, to the AA standard. I don't know if Chief Morris wants to, or Chief Popkin, or somebody from the chiefs and sheriffs wants to comment on that as well.
Vice Chair Atterbury, thank you very much. I think Mr. Davey touched on a lot of these points, but I will tell you that more than 50% of my deputies that I have here in my office have four-year degrees, bachelor degrees, and many of them have AA degrees that they've earned by way of going through police academies, as Mr. Davey spoke about. But what I've never increased, I've maintained the MPTSC standards of having a high school degree or GED equivalent with being a minimum of 21 years old, because I, number one, don't want to put any barriers up for hiring, and I don't want the military, the folks that have gone directly into the military, to be excluded from potential job opportunities, because they are some of my best people that we have here. So requiring an AA degree, I believe, sets up an artificial barrier in some aspects and eliminates some really good people that potentially could be there. I'm not saying that the more educated is not better, because I do agree with that, but there has to be some standards set up to make sure we're not excluding people that would very well be part of this process that don't necessarily have AA degrees.
Thank you. Yes, John Neski's here. Just introduce yourself for everyone.
Good afternoon, John Neski, Chiefs and Sheriffs. I just want to touch quickly on Sheriff Popkins' point, especially if we're trying to reach applicants from social and economically challenged communities. The tuition reimbursement forgiveness is amazing, and we're all for it, but you still have to pay that tuition up front. And especially if you have where you have to help your family with a salary while you pursue that AA, it is going to possibly limit some of the very worthwhile candidates that are coming from those backgrounds.
And Delegate Anderson, did you want to make a final comment on that?
Well, again, the goal is to provide the chiefs and sheriffs and superintendents around the state a greater pool of diversity based upon young people going into these programs, getting degrees, and then them being obligated to serve in a police department and therefore applying to whatever vacancies exist. And I guess I want to ask Chief Popkin, do you think that's a good idea? I mean, do you think that you would get more minority participation, especially African-American in this case, if a program like this were in effect?
Delegate Anderson, absolutely. And if you remember back in during House Bill 1016, we had this exact conversation, and we agreed with Chief Morris, and I agree with you back then that any potential to help us with recruitment, and that by way of having these college programs to offer incentives for us to increase our potential pool of applicants, is a great idea. And the chiefs and sheriffs absolutely support your recommendation. But we are just want to make sure that the devil's in the details and the language come up. So yes, absolutely. It's just like I talked to you in 2016 as well on this topic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will let Delegate McComas, I did say you could ask a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. My only concern is what happens if a person goes through it's going to become a law enforcement office. They go through the 4 years, and then after 2 years being in the field, they're like, nah, this just isn't right for me. It's just not the right fit. What I wanted is okay, that their tuition would be probated to the point that if they serve 2 years, it would be less than they have to pay the whole amount back. That was the only concern that I had, because or the other concern that I had is if they were injured on the job and they couldn't fulfill their obligation because of the injury. So that's what I was going to ask.
Well, I agree with that's a good point that you made. If they've in good faith tried to fulfill their obligations and something beyond their control came up where they couldn't do that, then yeah, I agree that everyone and that it should be prorated, that when they have to pay back their tuition, it's not all of their tuition. But like in ROTC programs that exist now, if the young person doesn't finish their obligation, they do pay back all the tuition. But we can make it a little bit easier if there's a reason why these young people couldn't do it that was not their fault. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you. So now if everybody could turn to page 10, line 29, and then it goes to the next page, page 11. And this is the section that says that prior marijuana use is not an automatic disqualifier, to becoming a police officer. And so does anyone have any comments, any committee members about this section? I will say I spoke with during the interim delegate Alonzo Washington, who said this was a big problem in his county. As you know, he chaired his county's policing work group, and it was just a barrier to recruitment. So I think the work group in the House agreed and thought this was a way to get more applicants in the pool who want to be police officers. Delegate Erican.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to check with the chiefs and sheriffs. I know that they had mentioned that they already had a standard. I think it was within 1 year. Is that accurate?
The current standard is no marijuana usage within the last 3 years. That's the Police Standards Commission took this up a couple years ago. It used to be 25 uses of marijuana would exclude you. Now it's nothing within the 3 years. That matches the federal standard that the federal law enforcement agencies use. There is currently a subcommittee of the Standards Commission that is looking at this, and their tentative recommendation is going to reduce the 3 years to 1 year, but it has not been. It's a tentative at this point, but it's currently 3 years.
Okay, and if I don't actually see any time limit in the current language of the bill, would you be amenable to if we matched it to your current research of 1 year?
I believe the 1 year that is likely to be the recommendation of the Standards Commission would probably be something that the chiefs and sheriffs could agree with. If it went down to marijuana is not a disqualifier, there are some federal prohibitions of possession of firearms for habitual marijuana users.
Right.
And that would be a potential very big problem.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions or comments on this provision? Delegate Davis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about prior marijuana arrests? I think we should include that, especially if they're over 3 years or 2 years.
If you
Disproportionate in our communities, and that may be a big barrier. We all know that they're disproportionately more of us are arrested because of that.
Okay, the committee can talk about that. Any more comments on this section? Delegate Erican, is your hand still, okay. Delegate Anderson?
Well, yeah, I want to follow up with the chiefs and sheriffs on Delegate Davis's comment. And I see Mr. Boatwright is here as well. And I'd like to hear his ideas, being the new head of the Maryland FOP. And that is, if a young man or young woman was convicted a year ago or paid a ticket for possession of marijuana, 10 ounces, the civil fine, does that automatically disqualify them now under the current standards? And what would your recommendation be, or your reaction to changing that standard? Clyde or Sheriff Hopkins?
Yeah, so thank you, Delegate Anderson. It's good
I'm
to
sorry, I
see
meant to call you Mr. Boatwright. Sorry.
It's always Clyde for you. Yeah, so it's good to see you again. So we've had discussions. We want to stay consistent with law, but internally we see that with me sitting on the Training Commission, we see the work that's going on with the subcommittee for the Training Commission, and how that standard has hindered the recruitment process. And we are in line with the recommendation that comes from the Training Commission as it relates to this. It's already 3 years. It's going to go down to 1.
Yeah, but that's for use. What Delegate Davis was saying, somebody in the last year had to pay a ticket for the civil penalty, or 3 years ago they were convicted of more than 10 grams of marijuana. Would that be a disqualifier? Because that involves the law.
Well, I'll say from the FOP's perspective, we're not opposed to people getting second chances. That's what we advocate for when officers face discipline. So if someone has already, faced their penalty and they can qualify in other ways, we'll let the police chiefs decide if they want to hire that person. But we wouldn't be opposed to standing in the way of someone with a second chance.
All right, Chief Popkin, same question.
Yeah, I think Clyde makes some very, very good points on this. You really have got to look, when you're doing background investigations, on the totality of the applicant, of the entire circumstances. You wouldn't look just specifically on, and remember, one of your examples, if it was 3 months ago, if we have a 1-year exclusion, that would be a disqualifier. But if on your other example, if it was 3 years ago and it was a civil citation for mere possession of marijuana, then we would look at it based on the entire background of the individual, and if their character and everything, their work history and everything else, and their clean arrest records and their everything else that we would be looking at in the entirety of the background. And we wouldn't necessarily be opposed to hiring somebody with that, as long as they met the current standard of the year that may be coming. We could certainly live with that. As Clyde said, we certainly want to give people opportunities, and something that they did when they were 18 years old is not necessarily what the character of somebody that is now 24, 25.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And what we're saying, though, is would you be opposed to us taking away your discretion on the issue of someone actually having an arrest, whether it's a civil or criminal arrest for possession of marijuana, with beyond the 1 year or 3 years? In other words, not just use of marijuana, but the actual arrest for possession of marijuana during that period of time that we're thinking about changing. Would you be opposed to us taking away your discretion on that?
Delegate Anderson, I'm not sure the bill itself takes away our discretion on who we hire. I think the bill would just say we can't use that in and of itself alone as the disqualifier not to hire somebody.
Okay.
We look at the total, any of the applicants, we look at the entire package of everything that they've been involved in. That may just be one small part of it. And if they're,
Right.
and
That's
if
a
they're
good point.
if they have other people that are looking for the, if we have one position, but we have 10 people that have applied, it may or may not come into play depending on the other qualified applicants.
All right. You've made a great point. It's not, it wouldn't be a disqualifier, but you could still consider it.
Yes.
Okay.
Delegate McComas?
Just a brief question. Okay, if you change it from 3 to 1, How do you know if they're not continuing to use marijuana? Do you do hair follicle? And it's my understanding hair follicle is only good for like the last 90 days. Or is it the polygraph? How do you determine that they're not using? Just curious to ask. So if we change it from 3 to 1, or there's no criminal charges, anyway, that's my question.
Sheriff Popkin, do you want to answer that, or is?
Madam Vice Chair, I'd be happy to. This is Chief Morris. As Sheriff Popkin mentioned, we look at the totality of the circumstances, the entire character of the background investigation. So many times information is revealed through the psychological evaluation that applicants are required to go through, as well as the polygraph, as well as urinalysis, and which is the drug testing in the applicant process. And most police departments have random drug testing within their agencies as backup checks. So there's a host of means to identify those that may be less than forthcoming as it relates to their use of marijuana or any other type of drug.
Thank you. And there's another reason why we can't have 500 people on here. I was trying to scan all the boxes and Sheriff Popkin was the only person I saw. So I appreciate that, Chief Morris. Delegate Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the only quick thing I'd add to this is say, however we write this, I think we should write this that when Maryland legalizes, this is not going to be a question.
Well, yeah, I think this is also a conversation that's going to be had in the whole legalization context. Okay, so moving on to page 11, line 30, and then it moves on to the next page. There's a lot of language, I think, reinstituting SWAT team reporting, and wanted to see if the committee had any questions for anyone here on that or had an issue with that. Moon, is your hand up from before, or?
Yeah, it's just a terminology thing. I think the last time we dealt with SWAT, we had a more generic terminology there, just because some of the departments were suggesting they don't call it SWAT, but does similar things, has similar risks that we're trying to avoid.
Okay, does anyone from the Chiefs and Sheriff, Mike Davey, do you know the answer to that? No?
No, actually, some call it SWAT, some call it QRT, Quick Response Team. The state police is the state team. I think there should be a way to come up with a definition that encompasses all special weapons and tactics units that covers everything. So you're just not locked into the letter of the law, SWAT. It covers everything that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. And I'm taking notes, but Claire, I'm sure you're taking.
Madam Chair, if I could we have some language that has been shared with us too that we can get to you to consider.
Thank you. Delegate Arakan.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, did we used to collect this, and what was the impetus for us adding it back in? And if we did used to collect it, why did we stop? And what were the results of the research?
Ms. Hughes. Refresh
We
my
did.
memory.
We had an annual report for probably 4 or 5 years. Some members may recall, I think it was right after Mayor Shai Calvo in Prince George's County had his house busted into. And so I think there was a sunset on the bill and we just never reinstituted it. So yeah, I think just in the interest of putting it back into place, and if there's a broader definition that's more appropriate at this point, I think that's fine. But yeah, this was in effect for 4 or 5 years. We can find the report from GoCop that people send in annually for you.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I would love to see what the results were. And what are we looking for specifically?
So, I mean, I think the idea is just to know how often and in what circumstances departments are deploying these special tactical units that, you know, are trained to be, I don't know what the right term is, trained to be more
specialized units.
Right, more forceful in some of their tactics. So we'll find the report and share it with you.
Okay.
I think it's been probably 4 or 5 years at this point. So
Great, thank you very much.
Any other comments on this section? Okay. Moving on to page 15, the body cam and independent investigation provisions. So with body cams, I will say, and then Delegate Moon, I'm going to ask you to, Moon, you can, Delegate Moon, you can, say your comments. You don't have to put them in the chat. 2, the body cams, Delegate Moon served on a separate work group that was specifically for body cams that got into the details. For our purposes of this work group, we were just to make the determination whether or not we should, everyone statewide should use body cams. And the work group said yes, and came up with the date of January 1, 2025. That was to allow the state to get over some budgetary issues and to also work out with appropriations how to help some jurisdictions pay for the body cameras. We know that that's an issue. We do not have to have a lengthy conversation about that. And we know that we have a friend now, Delegate Jazz Lewis is over in appropriations, and we can try to help get some funding for that. Delegate Arakan.
Yeah, that was going to be my concern. Like, can we make sure that our agencies are funded, and then also make sure that our state's attorneys on the back end are able to process? Because the one thing I heard from my state's attorneys is that if they have municipalities inside their jurisdictions, they use different software. So to read all of this stuff, they have to sometimes get up to 3 or more different software programs and then have people trained on those different software programs to process the information afterwards. So it could end up with a big fiscal note. But if this is definitely something that we're going to move forward with, obviously we're going to need to, fund it so that we're not, because smaller places are just not going to be able to do it. It's going to be terrible. So.
Delegate Moon, I don't know if you want to comment on what your work group did. I don't know where you went on my screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me just say, I regret to inform all of you that the body cam work group was not able to find the secret sauce to fund all of the body cam and redaction and MPIA request staffing needs. And so I think where we really went was trying to standardize what the data and formatting and protocols would be, so that you could have more commonalities between the vendors chosen. For the most part, we have everyone on one vendor and then a few other vendors. So we're not 100% on the same vendor either, just so that people are aware of that aspect of this. So the cost issue is real. The 2 other aspects, the one thing we did do is we're trying to get sort of master contracts negotiated with the vendors so that there's at least a negotiated price schedule that all the departments can take advantage of for lower cost. And in terms of, you've heard a lot about the cost of data, but the vendors are having unlimited data plans now, just like our cell phones. And so that there's more predictability in that, but all the departments are going to say, dealing with the redaction, the MPI requests, getting stuff to for evidence is where the cost is. And again, we didn't solve that. So the only 2 policy questions I throw out here that I had wanted to raise by amendment to go beyond simply a requirement here is that I would suggest that we preempt bargaining against the body cam policies we're creating, because I know that a lot of that right now, those decisions about how and when the body cams are deployed, theoretically that's in the guidelines created by the Police Standards and Training Commission, but those are not extremely prescriptive policies, and so there's a lot of discretion left to the local departments right now as to how these body cams are handled. So I would just suggest that we think about clear preemption on body cam policy here. And the other is the last time we did this, around the time of Freddie Gray, we didn't get farther than saying you can do body cams and not violate the wiretap statute. And we didn't fill in any of the details. And at least the one type of detail that you guys are aware of, I would like for us to think about that we had a hearing on is making them record more, record and save more of the footage. So that's all I got.
So Delegate Moon, do you have an amendment that you're proposing right now related to body cams?
Well, so how do you want to do this? I can.
So go ahead.
Okay, so I do have an amendment drafted, and what it would say is, this document says this document becomes the guiding rule on discipline. So somewhere in here it says we're preempting discipline. I had suggested we put in there and body cams and Public Information Act requests, since what we're trying to do through this process is create a new set of standards on that. So I have an amendment number I can share.
So hold on one second. Claire or Matt, are you available? And Liz, because you're operating this Zoom. So what I think everybody needs to be able to look at it. So I know it was emailed. I'm not sure everyone on the committee has it.
Okay, I can put it on my screen. Can you remind me?
Can you, so.
Do you want me to drop the amendment number or something?
I'm gonna, Liz, you want me to email it to you? I can email it to
It
you
would
right
be
now.
helpful if it was emailed.
I'll email it to my office real quick. Okay, Moon, do you want to keep talking about it real quick here?
Yeah, so there's two amendments I have to the body cam section. One would say, so right now, I'll explain both of them. One of them is what I just described, that where we preempt local discipline, we would also preempt on the issues of Public Information Act denials. So you can't bargain to say something that's allowed to be disclosed will not be disclosed because that's what we agreed to. And same with respect to body cam use, that since we're saying there's going to be a statewide use of body cams starting in 2025 or whatever, we don't want departments to go out and start creating different policies about that that might trip us up if we try to put those and implement those later. So that's the First Amendment. The Second Amendment is with respect to the features of body cams, which I really think, and this is stuff I learned a lot about on the other work group, which is that now body cams basically can be set so that the officers don't even have to push the button anymore. That in many circumstances, they'll just automatically click on when there's a described set of circumstances. A taser is fired, the ignition of a car, cars moving, dispatch, whatever, you can set those conditions. The one I would just like to draw your attention to is that there's a device setting that says when you hit the button, it records some amount of time prior to you hitting that button. It's the device settings are going to be 30, 60, 90, and 120 seconds. All of our departments seem to be using this default of 30 seconds. I'm suggesting a very modest nudge to 60 seconds, not the full 2 minutes, and to just do it for video. So we're not even talking about audio wiretapping. So I think
Okay,
so that's two amendments.
So let's do one amendment. Are they both in, Liz, can you scroll down? Are they both in this one document? No, this is just the 60-second one.
Yep, it looks like you've got 60 seconds on the screen. So all this would say is we're going to start having, not only are we going to require body cameras, but they're going to be statewide put on a setting that captures 60 seconds of video prior to the incident. So prior to the button being pushed, it's going to start saving 60 seconds of video. Again,
I'm going to second your amendment, and so we'll have to second your motion. We'll have discussion on it. And is this also in response to, I think in committee related to one of your bills, you showed some footage where there was a lot of activity prior to the body cam?
Yeah, so there were some cases where this feature is responsible for capturing questions about, I don't want to say conclusive, but evidence tampering or planting. It raised questions that impacted many cases. And so I think this is a proper venue for this type of feature to be discussed.
Okay, Delegate Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions to Delegate Moon. With regard to the amendment, and I guess that's what we're talking about, 60 seconds of video footage immediately prior to the officer activating. What about after the officer turns it off? You thought about that?
That's an interesting question. So you're saying they click it on and they turn it off, and the device should be made to record more time after it turns off?
Right, because if, number one, 99% of police officers will not do this. But if an officer, if that one bad percent knows that he's about to do something that's not necessarily kosher, he may turn off his body cam so it's not recording.
Well, let me suggest this, Madam Chair.
Yes.
That's an interesting, and part of the reason why I wanted to get this 60 seconds on here was to point everyone in the direction of all these new device features that have somehow not made it into policy or reg, and to preempt the situation where other folks figure out these features and bargain them at the lowest settings before we've had the opportunity to take a look at it. So you're seizing on another interesting possibility. But I will tell you, having read the product manuals now for these cameras, there are many of these types of things we could stick in here. I've not heard of an after it's ended, continued recording. But I would suggest this is a very modest one that the department's already familiar with and can implement just by, switching a device setting. I'm not sure about what you're suggesting.
Well, I think as a committee, we could probably, as a policy decision, maybe it's something that we didn't think of before. Maybe we should think of now. My other question is, Delegate Moon, if you can't answer this, maybe somebody from the Police Training and Standards Commission can. I like to try to figure out what the entire universe is in terms of the problem that we have with not everybody in the state, all police agencies in the state having police body cameras. Do you know what percentage of police agencies or percentage of police officers do not have or not currently using body cameras?
I think Delegate Anderson, I thought that information was presented to us, but I'm scrolling to see if someone from the chiefs and sheriffs would like to respond to that, if they happen to know off the top of their head. Otherwise, we can sift through. I think that was given to us. But I think, folks, for our purposes, we're not a funding committee. That's an appropriation. So we need to just make the decision of, do we want body cameras, which we did, and how, are there any other nuances? Delegate Moon, I'm going to suggest, Delegate Shetty did notice a typo in here.
Or whether we have to do it not nicely. And quite frankly, we're not in a position financially to not.
Delegate Shetty noticed a typo. It says immediately prior to the office activating the record button, so it should say officer.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you want to, we'll just hold this, and then we will deal with this at our next meeting. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine. You guys have time to think about it now and maybe suggest other device features like,
And Madam
Okay.
Chair, can I ask the Police Training Commission one question related to this?
Yes.
Who was here from the Police Training Commission? I forgot.
I am not seeing anyone. They were invited on the group anymore. but they were invited.
Or when Chief Morris attends those meetings, is he still on?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hey, Chief, with regard to body worn cameras and the protocols that the Police Training and Standards Commissions have done so far, have they limited or suggested that these body worn cameras don't have to be on every single officer, just the officers on patrol? In other words, not on detectives who are out undercover or whatever. Have they ever made any pronouncement either way on that issue?
Yeah, I believe it was addressed in the Body Worn Camera Commission that there are certain instances where the body cameras would be required, and it's primarily those that are involved in the patrol services and have the most contacts with our citizens, and that the circumstances that you mentioned would negate the use of the body camera, particularly for undercover and things of that nature. So yes, sir, it's been addressed.
Okay, so any new jurisdiction getting body cameras would only have to put it on patrol officers, probably. Is that right, you think?
Well, I think at the end of the day, that becomes a policy decision for the agency. But I think there are minimum requirements, as you've suggested, that where they have to meet at least the standards that have been identified by the Body Worn Camera Commission and put into the practices with the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Delegate Erican?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Moon, could you just remind me again, what was the First Amendment? Because this was the Second Amendment, or I thought the motion was on the First Amendment, but I think now it's on the Second Amendment.
They put up on the screen the 60-second body cam one first. So the motion was on that, but we're going to postpone that till next time anyway.
Okay. And then what was your first? I didn't understand. You said a lot of things that didn't have to do with body cameras for the First Amendment.
Can we put that one on the screen? The I have the amendment number if that's useful. It's
yes. What's the amendment number exactly?
393-229/1.
Sure. One moment.
And then while she's doing that, your Second Amendment about the body cams said purchased after 22, right? So then any agencies who had purchased them already, and because the older ones don't have the auto activation features, so would they just be exempted from this part of the policy?
The way this is written, yes, but I will tell you, since Delegate Anderson raised the prospect of other expanding this section, another member of this subcommittee, I don't want to speak for them, is suggesting to clarify the retroactivity to those cameras that can do this. So you may see an additional amendment when this comes back from one of our colleagues to clarify that point.
So you would intend to make people who have already bought theirs buy new ones?
No.
Oh, no.
So the way I wrote it, it would just be the ones being purchased going forward. But what I'm suggesting to what you're talking about, one of our colleagues on this subcommittee is contemplating amendments to say, if you bought one already and it has this capability of 60 seconds, you will in fact start using the 60 seconds. But no, I had not intended to make people rebuy anything, because I know some of the older ones might not do this.
Right. And then around the turning off policy, I didn't catch what was the goal of it. I know each department has their own policies on when it's appropriate to turn your camera off.
I have to check this device feature out. So the way I know it works and can do is that if you push the button, it'll save the prior 60 seconds if we pass this amendment. What Delegate Anderson was suggesting is not only that, when you tell it to stop and you push the button to turn it off, he wants it to continue recording after you've told it to turn off for an additional amount of time. And I guess the theory of I don't want to speak for him, but the theory of the case would be you want a little extra caught on the front and the back to get a bigger picture of what was going on. I just don't know if that second thing is a feature yet, so I have to double back with.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. I guess that's, I understand now what you're trying to say. Okay. And then I'm very uncomfortable though with the idea of just putting it on a probes to put money in for this. I certainly we put money in all kinds of bills in other committees, and this is such a mass. I mean, like Chief Nesky's just had his 5-year contract assessed for $500,000. I mean, you know, and that's not a huge department. So I think it's not smart for us to do an unfunded mandate on something that's going to be so expensive for so many localities.
So Delegate Arikan, to your point, we in this committee don't appropriate funds. We haven't since I have been here. That is an appropriations. And so, you know, if by whatever date we choose, 2025, and we still haven't been able to resolve that, or some jurisdictions still are having some problems, then we can, you know, revisit it.
Maybe
But
could we add in something that says, like, if there's a failure to appropriate funds, that there's a sort of a mandatory stopgap and we're forced to come back?
you can get an amendment drafted and we can take it up. So we are going to wrap up. Here's what I will tell the subcommittee. First, I want to thank my staff. Liz has never done this before, and Dylan has been working with her, and so they were just kind of thrown into the fire. So thank you. I appreciate it. I had to do that before I forget, to thank the people that take care of us. I want to thank all of the advocates for being here and interested parties for being here. It's really important. To the subcommittee members, we are going to be adding another meeting on Monday. So we will be meeting Monday. Currently, the time set for Wednesday is 12 o'clock, 12 to 1. And then we will be meeting on Friday at 1:30. So I know Friday some folks might have some things going on the subcommittee, so you might be in and out, and that's fine. We will vote when folks are here. If you have amendments, please get them drafted. Send them to me so I can make sure Liz has them, and we'll get them to the committee. I know some of you have emailed them to the committee already, but if you send them to me, we will get them to everyone on the subcommittee, and we can make sure that my office can get it up on the screen for everyone to look at. And so we'll try to get you those as soon as we have them, so you can look at them before the meeting if possible. Sometimes that might not be possible. At the next meeting, we will pick up where we left off with the body cam conversation. We will go into independent investigations, and then we will get into no-knocks. And then what I imagine I'm hoping we can start our conversation on LEOBR on Monday. And so look for a time soon. We'll send out an email. Not sure about the time just yet. Are there any follow-up questions from the subcommittee members? Delegate Shetty?
Thank you. Just procedural question, please, Madam Chair. Are we working directly with Claire on drafting amendments, or do we work with the amendments office?
Claire, I believe you can go to the amendment office. I think she is in communication with the amendment office. If she wants to jump in, that's fine, but I think they check with her, really.
Okay.
Claire?
Yeah, people should go to the amendment office to get amendments drafted, because I'll be working on the final subcommittee product.
Delegate Anderson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just one quick question of David Roca. David, when you testified, you talked about a bill that dealt with the enforcement officers' rights with regard to employment, and you kept referencing House Bill 630, Senate Bill 630, but that was a totally different bill. Do you know what the actual bill number is in the Senate?
If I said 6:30, Delegate Anderson, I apologize and misspoke. The Senate bill is 6:27.
All right, thank you very much.
Delegate Erickson, is that hand from before or?
It's for now.
Okay, go ahead.
I just, could you go just really quick back through the topics you want to address next week again, Madam Chair?
Yes, we'll pick up with this body cam conversation. So I imagine there'll be a few amendments there. Then we are going to talk about independent investigations. The work group agreed that when there has been a police officer shooting or other action that results in death or serious bodily injury, that there should be an independent investigation. We will talk about no-knock warrants and the recommendation or the language in the bill rather of changing the standard to clear and convincing, and then also the speaker's proposed amendments in dealing with warrants in general. And I want to start our conversation on the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. The legislation currently repeals it and puts in accountability measures. And so I want the committee to start having that conversation. So if you have any amendments, excuse me, related to those topics, please, I mean, I know today is Friday. So if you can't get an amendment by then, just be prepared to let's have a conversation about it.
Okay, thank you.
I do also want to point out when we're talking about the SWAT team, DeRay McKennison put in the chat, so thank you. So that bill was passed, the reporting Delegate Erickson, in 2009, and it looks like it sunsetted. The last report was 2014. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. And the work group and the subcommittee appreciates it. Thank you, committee members. Everybody have a great weekend.